Hi, everyone. I think we are live. I'm sorry for the delay. We were having some technical issues. Thank you all for being here tonight. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Elena Kidbani, and I'm a staff writer at the Palo Alto Weekly, and I'm also the author of the Peninsula Foodist blog and newsletter. And we've been talking for months now about trying to find a way to continue our in-person restaurant panel. So I'm really happy to be here for tonight for our first virtual event. And I'm so glad to have with me our three panelists, one of whom we're having some technical difficulties with, but she will be with us shortly. That's Claire Mack, owner of Claire's Crunch Cake in San Mateo and the city's first Black mayor. Max Fennell, owner of Fenn Coffee in Menlo Park and a professional triathlete. And Lisa Spencer, owner of Savor Seasonings Blend in East Palo Alto. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So in about half an hour or so, we'll start taking audience questions. So if any of you would like to ask the panelists a question, you can either click raise your hand at the bottom of the screen, or you can submit a written question in the Q&A box. So Max and Lisa, for people who might not know you, could you tell us a little bit about yourselves and why you started your businesses?
You go first, Max.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Max Fennell. I am a professional triathlete, and I am also CEO of Fenn Coffee. I started my coffee company because in the space of endurance world, there's endurance drinks, and I wanted a drink that wasn't going to upset my stomach when I worked out or when I went for a long bike ride or a run. So we created these cold brew shots that are about 4 ounces. And you can drink it while you're working out or pre-workout. But it's essentially just very high concentrated cold brew coming from our premium roasted beans. And we also sell whole beans as well.
And where do you source your beans from?
We source our beans direct. So we have partnerships with different types of farmers. And so we are direct trade with our farmers.
Mm-hmm. And you prioritize sort of family-owned, women-owned.
Correct. Yep. So we partner primarily with family-owned and women-owned farms, and our farms are in Ethiopia, Brazil, El Salvador.
Lisa, how about you?
We are Savor Seasoning Blends, and we started our business in 2015, my husband and I. So we're a small family business, and we make rubs, artisan salts, salts and grinders, butters, and a couple of pepper sauces. So we make all of our products at home. We sit in our little tiny kitchen and make things, and we create stuff and trial and error. And we sell in 2 stores locally. There's one, the Market at Edgewood in Palo Alto, and DeLucci's Market in Redwood City.
And why did you start the business?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. My husband and I were, so I bought my husband a book in 2014 from Whole Foods, and it was called Food in Jars. And later on, the following year, he made one of the recipes, which was some rosemary salt. And it was really good. And then I was like, oh, I want to try something, but there was nothing else really interesting in the book. So I just tried something. And so I made the vampire salt, which is the garlic salt. So I just took a bunch of stuff and put it in salt and, mixed it with salt and dried it out. And it took forever for me to figure out that it wasn't going to dry up all the way till I got a dehydrator. And we were just giving it away to people. Hey, you should try this. This is really good. And people kept saying, do you have some more of it? And then my husband made a rub. He found a rub recipe. So he made that and kind of gave it away. Somebody said, oh, I want some more. I'll pay you for it. Because we weren't thinking business. But then it's funny, we were trying to figure out what made us start the business. And I just remember we started selling it to people, and I joined a pop-up, a vendor pop-up in East Palo Alto at a church, and somebody said you should sell your stuff. So I went and did that, and people loved it, and I kept getting invited to more and more of them. And then I sat up one night and built a website, which I'll never do again. And then I started holding pop-ups locally, and they became kind of a trend. And we vend all the time now. So I get orders online. I have people come to my house. Um, I get probably about 6 or 7 people come to my house each day because they need more of the vampire butter, or they need some of this, or they need some of that. So it's turned into a real business. But, you know, I can't remember the conversation we had where we said, hey, let's make this a real business. So that's our history.
Yeah, sounds like it was more organic than a point in time when you made that decision.
Yeah, definitely.
What challenges have you faced as Black business owners in this area? I've talked a little bit with this about this with Max. Maybe you could go first. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me see if is Claire with us? Maybe not quite yet. We will get her on. Sorry, go ahead, Max.
Well, so we've had some challenges, and we also we haven't had any challenges. So the biggest challenge has always just been access to capital. We've been lucky enough to work with certain small mom and pop grocery stores around here. So we're also in the market at Edgewood, and DeLucci's, Bianchini's, in the Willows market. So thankfully, they were always willing to put you on the shelves or make space for you on the shelf so you can sell your product. But when it comes to expanding and having access to capital, that's been the toughest thing for us so far. I mean, I keep having to go back to the bank and say, like, hey, look at us, our numbers are growing and I need to expand. I need, I need capital to expand. And they're just, oh, well, they give me, some type of excuse of like, oh, why don't you just, give us another year's worth of numbers and then we can see, or why don't you do this? It's never, hey, here's our business plan. We're growing. There's a demand for us. We need more employees. We need to hire. We need to get a location. And that's been the biggest challenge for us so far.
Yeah. Lisa, do you feel like you've faced any particular barriers?
Not as a Black person. No, I think there's a novelty about selling seasoning blends and how cool the story is. So I haven't really faced a lot of obstacles. I think if I were, I don't think I've really faced any. I've faced obstacles that I've created on my own. So I don't think I'm really qualified to answer that question because I haven't really run into it. I feel like they embrace it because it's a Black family who has started a company. I've noticed in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, there's this great, I'm trying to think of the word, support system that has come out from our people. Whereas before, when you started something, everybody would be quiet. But now there's this support your people, support Black businesses. And it's amazing because if it weren't for that, we wouldn't be where we were. Everybody's using their voices. I don't think I've ever asked anybody to say, I've never said, hey, try this and please post about it. People just do it constantly. And it's just so great. So I think so far I felt nothing but support.
Claire, can you hear us? Are you here?
I can hear you.
Good. Glad you're here.
And both of your stories are fabulous.
Thanks.
How did you end up baking cakes out of your home?
Well, I started in the 80s. One of my daughters came home with a candy. She was working at one of the malls, and I tasted it and said, this is the candy that used to be on the Blum's Crunch Cake. Our family was in love with the Blum's Crunch Cake. It was one of the most unusual cakes in the world. It was started at a German bakery called Blum's. It was in San Francisco, Palo Alto, San Mateo. And the store went out of business in the 60s. I don't know why, but the head chef was Mr. Veal, W-E-I-L. So I just started replicating it on my own through taste. I happened to come from a long line of good cooks. My aunt owned 3 restaurants in San Mateo, and she came to San Mateo in 1927. So people in our family just know how to cook. My dad was a marvelous barbecuer from Texas, and one of my daughters went to the CIA. My middle daughter went to the CIA and has chefed in many of the restaurants around Northern California and had her own catering service. So we just cook. We know how to cook, and we know how to do things from taste, and that's how I started making the cake. But it became too difficult to give away because it's too expensive. So I started charging. Two of my friends owned bakeries, and I sold my cake in Kathy's Creative Cakes in downtown San Mateo for many, many years before I retired and went into politics. And when I retired from politics, I went back into cakes. So that's how I got started.
You had a career pre-cakes. Could you tell us about that?
I've had several careers. I had a 30-year career in radio and television in the Bay Area. I was a politician. I was a city council member in the city of San Mateo and became mayor 3 times. I owned a dress shop. I've done all sorts of things. Just the idle mind is the devil's workshop. Therefore, I want to stay far away from the devil.
So when I was putting together our recent list of local Black-owned food and drink businesses for people to support, which included all 3 of you, I was really struck by the fact that most of them were pop-ups or food cottage businesses, people selling food out of their homes, sort of like Lisa, or mobile operations. There were very few Black-owned restaurants in Silicon Valley. So why do you think that is? Why are there so few Black-owned brick and mortar full service restaurants in this area?
Say because of the high lease fees. I think the dollar amounts are ridiculous. You're looking at companies that are not Black owned that can't make it in Palo Alto for more than 3 or 4 years. And as a bunch of the tech companies pour in, the realtors are charging higher rents because they can, and it's driving out business.
The last Black restaurant in San Mateo was a restaurant called Gators, and he did
I loved him.
Wasn't he wonderful? He's back in San Mateo, but he hasn't opened a restaurant yet. I'm pulling up for him. But he had a white tablecloth, Southern cuisine restaurant. But as you said, Emily, the price of rent was ridiculous. And the last landlord he had, or one of the last ones, saw that he was successful because not only did he serve this wonderful food, he included jazz. And the landlord thought he was becoming a millionaire and kept going up on the rent, and Gator just couldn't handle it. Glenn, I can't think of his last name, but it was his real name is Glenn. But his food is exquisite, and I hope he will start. I hope he can get some backers so he can start again.
Max, I know you were looking at opening a cafe in Redwood City, and then now it sounds like you're looking in San Francisco. So what has that process been like for you?
Yeah, so that process has been pretty challenging because what we've been trying to do is find an established business and essentially acquire it and go to the bank that way or go to an investor that way. So just find an established business that already has some type of foot traffic, but the owner's just, kind of, ready to move on. And, for me, it's, I'm a young person, so it's tough for me to go to the bank and say like, hey, can you guys trust in me to, to do all this, even though I have the experience and even though the company's being successful. It's just like what they're saying is when you go and look at a location, I'm trying to find something under 5,000, and that's tough. So that's appealing to anyone that's willing to lend to you. And really it's you're just the lease is just too high, right? And that's just what makes it tough, because then when you crunch the numbers, you're looking at paying well over 6 figures in lease, and then that really just hurts the profitability of what you're trying to do.
Are you still opening in San Francisco?
Oh, we're still looking at that location, but right now, like, it's still just trying to find the capital to go through with it. And right now, when we went to the bank said, "Hey, this just doesn't really make sense for us right now. See if you can find a better option." So we're trying to find a different business, but thankfully, there are some options out there. It's just I have to always kind of go through all these different weird routes and whatever. I can't just go to the bank and say, "Hey, here's how much I need," and just execute on that. That's what we would ideally do. But really, I have to find something that's an established business owner that's selling their location and go that way.
And each of you has said that you've seen a surge in sales as a result of this recent sort of effort to support Black-owned restaurants and businesses. So how have your businesses been impacted in the last few weeks? Oh, you're muted, Lisa.
I can't hear you, Emily.
I said, I'm blaming you, Elena, because I mean, I have a really good presence on Facebook, and I have my business page, and I've got word of mouth, and it's been gradually kind of increasing, but not as quickly. The sales haven't increased as quickly as I thought they would. But then I got an article was written about me last year because you mentioned me to one of the editors. And so that kind of pushed us up a little bit. And then every time you and I talk, something happens and it goes up a little bit. But I think in addition to, people, like I said, they really want to buy things from small businesses. They want to buy things from Black-owned businesses. And somebody else asked me the question, and they were like, do you think it's because of the Black Lives Matter issues or racial injustice? I think it's a combination of that and just what feels good to people, whether or not these issues have been going on. And at one point I was like, I really don't care as long as I get the sales. But I do think, in addition to the racial injustice, I also think that the COVID-19, the pandemic, is making people stay at home and they're cooking more. But I think it's time for us to be supported by everybody. And I think that it feels good to call it out and say, hey, we're a small Black business, support us. It's a novelty. I hope it doesn't wear off.
Claire, I think you said that you had to hire someone to help you answer the phone. You were getting some.
I've had to hire 2 people. I could not do it on my own. Unlike a Mack, I'm at the other end of the spectrum on the age calendar. I could not do it by myself. At 83, I should be sitting down rocking somewhere, and I don't think I'll ever do that, but I just could not do it. I couldn't put crunch on a cake. I couldn't bake a cake and answer the phone. So I just let the phone go until I found a lovely set of sisters. In fact, their mother came to me for some political information, for some political advice, and she said, I have a daughter, she can volunteer. So I have had these 2 lovely young ladies in the kitchen doing everything. I've taught them everything I possibly could, and they're wonderful. If I was Max's age, perhaps I could do it. But it was impossible. It was absolutely impossible. This cake already had a reputation. It is one of the most delicious things you've ever eaten. I have innovated. The basic cakes are coffee and lemon.
Sorry.
Which do you like the best, Emily?
This is Lisa. I like lemon. Anything lemon.
Oh, who's Emily? I see Emily Freeman.
Oh, I think she's the
marketing director.
Oh, Lisa Spencer. I'm sorry. Now your name is appearing on the bottom. I'm sorry. But then I added chocolate and strawberry, and I use whole strawberries. Then someone came by. Well, let me back up a little. I always did banana, and now people are asking for banana. And someone the other day asked for peanut butter. So we're now doing peanut butter. But the most popular cakes are the coffee flavor, which is the mocha crunch cake. The second, and my favorite, is the lemon. then the strawberry and the chocolate. And people like all of the flavors. I had a huge Asian clientele before your lovely article. And after all of this wonderfulness happened, more Caucasians have shown up. But many of the people who are coming say, "Is that the Blum's Crunch Cake?" I said, "Yes, it is, but it's now Claire's Crunch Cake." So the sales have been wonderful, and I hope it stays that way. I have reduced my employees' attendance because I am now able to answer the phone. But in the beginning, the first 2 days, I said, "What on earth happened?" Duh. I didn't realize what had happened, and the phone was just ringing off the hook. So we're back to some type of normalcy, but I hope I never get back to normalcy. I hope it will stay at some kind of wonderful high level.
I think maybe it has to do with exposure.
Yes, I ran an ad in the paper. I had a weekly ad in one of the local newspapers. I have social media places. Two youngsters from one of the high schools, Aragon High School, did a web page for me. A lovely young lady who was the Asian ex-Miss California also did a page for me. People have been wonderful at volunteering, but it still wasn't enough. And then came Elena Cadbany. And wow, the roof blew off my house. People have been asking me to get a brick and mortar place, but I've worked in bakeries. I don't want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I have a lovely kitchen, so I'm doing it from my home. This is my cottage industry here in San Mateo. I doubt that I'll ever go to a restaurant.
Max, I'm curious what you think of these lists, lists encouraging people to spend money at Black-owned businesses. Do you think that it's a positive thing, or does it have its own shortcomings?
Yeah, I think the lists are very important just to bring awareness. And also to answer your question, for us, we've also seen a significant increase in sales. I believe it was in 1 week, we did the most sales we've ever done online. And since we're a small batch roaster and we make everything fresh, I mean, we're still trying to keep up with the sales. But I think it's important that people see these businesses to support, because there's often someone like me behind that's a young person that doesn't have a lot of capital, but they just have a business that's not really being given the same opportunity. And yes, we're on the shelves, but we need that awareness. So you writing that article, I mean, I'm going into the stores and the manager's telling me like, "Hey, people are coming in asking for your coffee." And I'm like, "Oh man, all right, I'm staying up until like 1 o'clock in the morning, bagging and, getting things roasted and getting things brewed." So I think these lists are very important.
There's a lot of discussion right now about food media's own shortcomings and failures when it comes to reporting on and employing people of color. What are your thoughts on how Black-owned restaurants and Black food culture is represented in the media? And do you think that food media can better present Black food culture without tokenizing it?
That's hard because everything is soul food. Everybody thinks soul food is the only food we eat, which is difficult. Everybody drinks coffee. That coffee is universal. Everybody seasons their food. So it has no color. It has no gender. It's just what you have for food. Everybody likes dessert. But so many people think that the only type of dessert we eat is sweet potato pie. And that's far from the truth.
I agree.
Lisa, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I agree with Claire completely. I think then the next step is to portray that, to break that stereotype, if you will, by continuing to portray more businesses, Black-owned restaurants and food businesses, so that people can start thinking of us in a different way. I mean, my friend slash cousin, because she's both, she makes ginger shots. And that is so not typical of what people think that we do. And her business is amazing, and she's obsessed with it. And she doesn't just mix them, she likes to write paragraph after paragraph about the benefits of each one of the ingredients. And it's definitely not typical. But I feel like when we're doing these things, like selling coffee and cake and seasoning blends, we're breaking barriers that honestly, I don't even think we thought about the barriers, but they're out there, and making way for other people to continue to do the same thing. Like the young people can go and say, hey, you know, I'd like to do this and I'd like to do that. We're not all about soul food. So this is our opportunity to prove that.
Yeah.
It's very interesting when you watch a Black movie, and I have nothing against soul food. I will kill a Baptist preacher over a piece of fried chicken.
Right.
But, you know, they don't depict anybody sitting back after the meal having a cup of coffee. It just hasn't been shown. And it's not that it's untypical. My mother was a coffee drinker. I'm not. But all our lives, my mom drank coffee. But it just isn't shown by popular media. I don't know what they show us drinking in movies. I'm not that much of a moviegoer any longer. What do they show us drinking, Max?
It's usually the culture's usually pushing alcohol opposed to sophisticated and coffee, right? Because our coffee company, since we're direct trade, we directly pay the farmer. So I get text messages from the farmer saying, hey, Max, how's everything going? Have you roasted it? Have you picked up any more coffee? Are you good? Like, is everything all right? Is there anything you need from me? Did you like the last, like, how's the roast turning out? That's the type of relationship we have with our farmers. And we don't see pop culture really pushing the image of drinking coffee or the understanding of fair trade, because what happens is when you buy coffee from us and we buy the coffee from the farmer, we're directly helping that whole entire economy, and we're helping those families down there. There's no middleman. I'm not haggling prices with the farmer. I'm not saying, oh, can you lower this price? I say, hey, what does it cost per pound? And I just, we just pay it. So I think it would be great to see if, the media was just showing Black business owners that have the high-end restaurants and there are making things other than soul food, and see us drinking coffee opposed to a sports drink or that's with sugar in it or alcohol.
I have to admit that when I walked into the market that day, the first time I saw you in there, and I'm going to admit it, I saw you standing there and you were getting set up or something like that. And my mind said, ooh, a Black man making coffee. So it's not just, I'm honest. That's what I said to myself. And I was so excited, but that's it. And I think it's that whole depiction that not only non-Black people are guilty of it. I think it's sometimes ourselves as well.
Max, do you feel like you've encountered any sort of misperceptions about your company because of that?
I don't think I have. I think because I was lucky enough to start this company along with what's happening with my career. So there's been a little bit of the mixture of the both that has really kind of helped each other. As well as I'm very transparent of how this company has grown. So there's been a lot of people that have seen it. So thankfully, we've had a nice little ground floor, as well as a lot of these grocery stores around here are individually owned. They're mom and pop owned, and it's so helpful when the people at the market at Edgewood are very supportive of your product. It's not like they hide your product, right? It's just like, oh yeah, if you want to put in a shelf here and put a whole bunch of coffee there, we'll do it. And it's been so many of those grocery stores which has really just helped us grow and helped us get out there. That's really just been a very solid ground floor for us.
Yeah, I talked with the owner of the market at Edgewood pre-COVID. They were doing a whole vendor day to support women-owned businesses, and she talked a lot about how just the sort of a local grocery store supporting local businesses in that way, like it just is sort of a supportive cycle that's really helpful for everyone.
Yeah.
Right. Drager's was that for me. Drager's put my cake in, and you know they have a lovely bakery department. Their desserts are gorgeous. They put my cake in the ice cream, the frozen ice cream department, and some people like the cake like that, and others don't. You know, the cakes are. You're very individual in your taste for the cake. Some people like it when it's crunchy. Some people don't like it when it's crunchy. When it was originally sold, it was not crunchy, but now people are spoiled and they like that crunch. So it's individual. I tell people, you know, some people they want to buy it the day ahead, and I say, well, if you want it crunchy, then you have to put the crunch on yourself. And if you put the crunch on yourself, you don't want to do that again, because when it gets all over your house, yeah, it's not a nice product to clean up. Very sticky candy. The candy is called honeycomb or sea foam, and it's sugar, water, and syrup. And I feel bad because the media, people like Bill Maher are so against corn syrup, and if you don't like sweets, if you're diabetic, this is not the cake to eat. It just don't put it on your menu. People call up and say, "I'm looking for a cake that's not very sweet." Well, you don't want a crunch cake.
Wants a cake that's not so sweet.
It's a sweet cake. If any cake that's got a gooey frosting and then you put candy on top of it, it's going to be sweet.
I just want to remind everyone watching, if they want to ask a question, they can raise their hand. There are a few questions in the Q&A box, mostly about how to find all of your products. Are they available for online orders? And if not, how do you find them?
Well,
Go ahead.
well, Fen Coffee, we're online, as well as we are in the market at Edgewood, DeLucci's, Willows Market, Bianchini's, and we're also now offering local deliveries within 10 miles of Menlo Park. So we strongly suggest to do local deliveries, and it's much easier for us to get that out the door than mailing it to you.
Oh, that's smart. We are also in the market at Edgewood. Our products are on the meat counter, and we are at DeLucci's as well, and our products are on the counter there. We have a website called, it's www.savorblends.com. And if you're local, I've got a lot of people who say, I don't want to pay the shipping fee, I'm local. And they'll just message me, send me an email, and come by. So I'm Lisa at savorblends.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, having been born in the 1930s, I consider myself a troglodyte. I don't want to be dragged into the 21st century. Call me on the telephone. Although the website is there and the Facebook is there, and tonight I cleaned up my emails a little bit and saw all sorts of requests for cakes. I'm asking people to call me, although I do have 2 young people working with me, and they even helped me get something on Instagram the other day, and I was really excited. But I couldn't get on here tonight because I don't know how to do it. Our family has a Zoom conference every Thursday night. My husband, who's 92, knows how to do it better than I do. I just don't do it because I'm doing cakes.
Another question, have any of you had any success with alternative sources of capital, such as crowdfunding, microloans, or community-based shareholders?
I haven't.
I haven't even tried, and as you were talking earlier, Max, about funding, I have not gone to a bank. I started out very slowly until I made my business pay for itself. It started out just slowly. When I could finally buy my ingredients and not have to pay for it out of my own pocket, I felt I was being successful, and that's what's going on now. And to be able to pay people to help me is a phenomenon that is just beyond belief, and I'm really, really happy about that. It will not last. I'm trying to get it back to where I can handle it pretty much on my own. And if it doesn't, God bless the world. It would be wonderful to be able to afford to have employees.
Here's another question that I endorse. Would the crunch cakes go well with Max's coffee, and have the two of you considered joining forces for a cafe?
Listen, my mind is spinning right now, and I don't know how to get to him because I even gave up driving. I had a little altercation on the bridge, and I decided, let somebody else do the driving. I never thought I would stop driving, but I don't do it anymore. But Max, we must get together.
We can do it. I can drive. I can do the driving.
I'm making myself sound like an old fuddy-duddy and an old codger. I'm not really. I get around fine, but you should know when to give up the keys. And when I went into someone's lane because I had had too much to eat for lunch, I said, I need to give this up. One car per lane, please.
Another good question. What percentage of your price or your sales goes to the supermarket products for Lisa and Max?
Now say that. Would you repeat that? I didn't quite hear it.
Yeah, I think this will apply to Lisa and Max. Someone's asking what percentage of their sales of when they sell their products in a supermarket goes to the market.
I see.
So most vendors, I believe, just sell it wholesale to the market or to the grocery store, and then the grocery store then determines the price. But generally, you kind of work in conjunction with the market so that it's a reasonable price for them.
So when I
was in Drager's, I did it 60-40.
Which way?
The store got 40%.
Okay. So I didn't know what to do about pricing when I walked into the market at Edgewood and talked to one of the owners. But he was so helpful and so supportive, and he just was so excited. And then I said, well, I don't know what I'm doing. And so he pretty much told me, it was really good advice. And I tell all people that I know that are starting businesses, because I'm all like, oh, let me help you with this. I can tell you not, anything that any knowledge you can share, you should pass on to people and try to mentor them as best you can. So he said to me, just calculate the cost of your products, which is all of your materials, all of your packaging, all of the freight for having the stuff shipped, anything you have to pay for to make the product, you should figure it out and then mark it up 45%. And then they mark it up after that. So you make a profit and then they make a profit as well. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I would have just said, oh my God, what did I do? I don't know how to I don't know how to do this. And I would have shrunk into a corner. But yeah.
We have a live question from someone who's going to speak. So I'm going to let him.
Sounds like he's
permission. This is for Zach F.
Max, you guys have a bunch of questions in the Q&A and suggestions about finance.
Hey, it's Zach.
Hi, Zach.
Hi. So Elena mentioned that when she did her roundup of Black-owned food and beverage businesses, most of them were cottage food operators, such as yourselves, or mobile food operations. I see mobile food operations as being an important entry point for chefs across all groups of underrepresented minorities. I think it's certainly the case in New York City, but you also see it in Los Angeles. Even in the Bay Area, all of my favorite mobile food operators are trucks with operators that are Mexican or of Latin origin. Lisa and Max both talked about why it's tough for anybody, especially minorities, to secure absurdly expensive leases. So do any of the panelists feel that county level laws are too strict and that counties could be doing more to support opportunities for mobile food operators like food carts and food trucks, as well as cottage food operators? And in addition to the panelists, Elena, I'd like your thoughts as a journalist on this, and Claire, I'd love your thoughts as a former legislator. Thank you.
I can start with the answer for that first, because I just this past weekend I was walking down Menlo Park, and then we went and walked down Palo Alto, and I think right now with this option of closing down the streets, I think the city right now needs to be offering up spaces for vendors as well on the street. I think that there's some places that are also vacant, but I think, you know, street vendors saying, hey, you can have this little box here and you can set up your table and, you know, you have it for the month. I think that's a great way of getting entrepreneurs on the street so that we can, you know, talk to people and just, you know, sell things in person.
Good idea.
At least there are
There's actually a person in Menlo Park who does something like that. She's on Santa Cruz Avenue. And I'd forgotten about it until you brought it up, but she has 2 different buildings. I don't know if she still does, but she actually does rent out the empty building for daily pop-ups. And then she kind of puts a sign up and says, this is who's going to be there. And now that I thought about it, I'm going to go visit her and see if she's still there. But that's an opportunity. That would be really cool. You know, one of my husband's dreams is to have a food truck because he likes to cook. He likes to barbecue and he likes to create. But we've never actually tried to take that step, number one, because I hate cooking. I mean, I'm a really, really good cook. I can create stuff. I love to do it just because I see it as a challenge. But if someone were to say, what's for dinner tonight? I'd be like, I don't know. But yeah, so Zach, I hadn't thought about the food truck business, but I think a good idea, and I appreciate you bringing it up, would be like a cart where I could sell seasoning blends.
Yeah, I think the positives of this whole time, and Max mentioned downtown streets being closed to traffic, and I think that cities are becoming a lot more, they're being open to things that they would not be open to during normal times. And they're like in Palo Alto, they built parklets outside restaurants in a number of days, which things like that usually take, months. So like the permitting process for building restaurants, for starting a new business can be so protracted and expensive and difficult to go through. So I think the more cities are open to being experimental and innovative and giving, up and coming businesses a chance to just get more exposure will be a really great thing for everyone.
And as a former legislator, I think Zach's question was very, very good. When I was active in politics, I remember sitting in meetings and we didn't want to call things taxes, so we added fees. And we were always adding fees. And what we're going through right now in the United States really has me thinking. We've got to we need to begin changing how we fund different entities in our cities. And I am so for what people are saying to rethink how we fund police departments. We have to change what's going on in the United States. And to use funding in other ways, we can be more helpful to our populace. There are too many people in our country who have not. And we need to, as legislators, start thinking of ways to reallocate our fees, taxes, and finances. We're not spending our money wisely, in my opinion. There are other ways to make this country work. To have had farmers throw food out when we know we have people in this country who don't have enough. That was absolutely a sin. So as a former legislator, I know we need to do better, and I know we can do better, and I know the funds are there. We tax people up the yin yang. I get tickled about living in San Mateo. I've lived here all my life. I live in what is called the lower socioeconomic part of the city. And I want you to know that my taxes have never gone down. My services have not always been correct until I got involved in politics, because people think if people of color live in a certain neighborhood, then those people don't want the same thing that the rest of the city wants. And having lived here all my life and knowing what San Mateo is, I know how I want to live and I know how I want funds allocated. Therefore, I know there is room to make some changes, and I hope we start electing people who will start thinking about different ways of allocating the funds they take from us as citizens.
Hear, hear.
Emily, why don't we let Verna Jones ask her question? Verna, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. I was listening and I was typing. I didn't know I was speaking. Sorry. I was but I guess I'll kind of read it. Sorry. Thank you. It's a pleasure being a part of this and listening to all of you. And I think it's very gratifying that we have these opportunities to be able to connect in this manner with everything else that's going on in our world. And you know, it looks like we're so far apart, but yet we're so close. I think we've been able to come together in a much better way right now, which has allowed us to have this type of discourse and kind of looking inside of who we are as people. And food is one of those ways. And so I'll just kind of read kind of what I was gonna say, if I can ask it, and then touch on that. I basically looked at food ways of African-American people or the African diaspora is America's food. It's somewhat the world's food. So I never look to ever say or let anyone place soul food in a I would say a deficit column, because it has been the pathways and the narrative for us as an African-American people from our past, our present, and our future. And I would never deny something that has nourished our soul at our elders' table. So I would not let anyone else do that, because it's just like our spirituals and everything else that has led the way and has assisted other people's movements, as we can see on a daily basis on the Food Network, or in a number of people's who have called themselves celebrity chefs, have benefited greatly from the recipes of our forefathers and those of today. So I think it's very well known that we're fully capable to have a white tablecloth restaurant. I think it's very well known that we have worked in the kitchens from Europe. We've worked in the White House. When you look at any of the history of any of the chefs that started set up the kitchens for the White House. So it's known and fully well known what we're capable of doing and what those recipes have represented to other people. But I just think it's part of, again, the systematic racism in this country to keep us in the shadows that have benefited, other people have benefited greatly from. And so that's where I think you're running into that young man in regards to the banks and everything else. It's not the first time. People want to subjugate us into what they want to call as though they're trying to disrespect us, but we can never allow anyone to do that. And having our places of business of how we choose to be able to connect with our community. Because people they come and they seek us out, and then they take away from what they've seen in our locations where we're able to put together whatever we might need, however that, in whatever form that might be. And then they might go off and do what they need. So I hope I'm making sense, but I was just listening to all of you, and I was just making me think about some other instances, because I've worked with chefs and a number of different people and from different backgrounds. And I know that we oftentimes don't get the benefit of the fundraising or the investment that other people get. And that's just something we have to just keep moving and fighting for. And like you said, reach into our own community because people are out there willing right now, especially, to support each other.
There are some offers for support on the Q&A. Someone also mentioned an organization called Slow Money, which I haven't heard of, a grassroots national food movement that puts entrepreneurs together with investors all along the food chain. A great chapter exists in this area. And this woman gave her, her Mack and someone else to reach out if they're interested.
Cool. Nice.
Someone else also asked, in what ways are your businesses inspired by your experiences growing up as Black Americans?
Well, I'll start with that. I think just being an entrepreneur and having ownership, as well as, for me being a professional athlete, I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to branding. And whenever we're trying to push something and whenever someone else is trying to market it us, I just always wanted to be in a position where if I was in a situation where I was marketable, that I wanted to have a brand behind that that represented everything that I had gone through and everything that I had earned. So for me, I just felt like ownership of my brand was a very big, important thing to me.
Mm-hmm. You're muted.
Lisa, I can't hear you.
Sorry, my dog is chewing a bone in the corner, so I keep having to mute myself. So I feel like our style of creating seasoning blends, for me, it's reminiscent of my mother, because she was an amazing cook. She cooked for people. She would make something for one of my friends and say, go take that over there to so-and-so. I know she likes it. But if you were to ever ask her what she put in a certain thing, she would say, I don't know, I just threw something together. She never followed recipes. I, unfortunately, am the same way. If I tried to follow a recipe, I don't know what happens, but suddenly I'm not on course. But so all of the stuff that we make is just putting it together by taste and putting a little bit more in, tasting it, putting it a little bit more in. So people have offered to come in and help us package stuff and blend stuff. And then I always tell them, I can't have help with that because I don't have anything to tell you how to make it. So when I'm creating stuff, I think I'm channeling my mother, just adding and adding to taste. My husband, however, is really, really regulated and systematic. I don't want to use that word anymore, but he's very regulated about how he does stuff. So when he makes the rubs that he makes, he knows how many cups of this and how many cups of that. And he's always trying to get me to do the same thing. And I don't know how, I can't. I just get too confused. But when he makes his rubs, it always tastes the same, which is good. When I make mine, it doesn't, and I end up adding a little bit more of that and a little bit more of that, and going back and saying, oh, that's too much. So my recipe, the quantity I make ends up being bigger and bigger and bigger. But I'm channeling my mother, and I kind of think I like it.
Lisa, your story reminds me of my aunt. First of all, when she went to a restaurant, and she went to many restaurants, she always had a bag of seasoning in her purse because no one could season food the way she wanted it seasoned. And she reminds me of you. She never measured. She made biscuits. She just put her hand in there, pulled the flour out, and she made everything.
And it was
everything in that fashion. And Max is tickling me. It's not funny. I think the same people who are in banking, who were banking when my husband got out of the Army in 1952, we couldn't get a loan to buy a house. This man had just come home from Korea, where he was almost killed. And the same bankers didn't want to give us a loan. And they're doing the same thing to you in 2020 that was done in 1952 in this country, and it doesn't have anything to do with your ability. It has a whole lot to do with the color of your skin. And I'm not happy about that.
Right.
And I hope that the lady who called earlier didn't think I was putting down soul food cooking. The recipe I'm using right now just happens to be one that was started by a German person. And I think that's what's wonderful about American food. All of these countries have come here and made a contribution to our cuisine. The American cuisine is, I have Italian friends who said their pizza in the United States is better than the pizza in Italy. People who say that the Mexican food here is better than in Mexico, or that the Chinese food is more, there are more varieties and it's better. That's because there's an American gravy that goes through what we do. We improve on things.
Right.
That's part of what America is. We have our warts and we have scars and we have blemishes, but by God, there's something that goes on in this country. When it's done well, we have been able to put it together and do it. And that's what, Verna was her name, I think. I think that's what she's talking about. We do some things better in this country. We just do.
Yes, Verna, I'm sorry. Yes, you're so good. My husband is over here going like this as you talk, pointing and saying, yes, keep talking.
Or something else that would remind you of someone you know is that Mack said that something he's been thinking about in this moment is running for local office, just as a response to everything going on in this moment, which is sort of like many years ago. So Max, I'm curious, could you tell us sort of why you feel motivated to run for a seat on the city council? I don't know that this is official yet, but you've been thinking about it.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about running for city council because of everything I've seen going on. I think what it's really done to wake me up is I think currently at this current moment, there's just a lack of leadership at the local, state, and national level. And, you know, I'm 32, and where I live, my rent has gone up every single year that I've lived here in Menlo Park. And even as the beginning of this pandemic was happening and they wanted to renew my lease, they were originally trying to raise my rent. And I'm like, how can you guys really think about raising my rent during the pandemic? And then on top of that, I think since I've lived out here, I think I've lived out here about 5 years now. I've been pulled over by the cop 5 separate times and twice on my bike. So on my pedaling bike, not a motorcycle, my racing bike. And what that says to me is that I just can't go another year expecting someone else to tackle the high cost of living here and someone else to bring up rent control and another person to bring up police reform. I mean, what I think is real honest police reform is continual training, right? Getting the police, I think police should have to train in civil rights issues, in equality issues, in monthly take a test where they have to get a certificate at the end of the month, and they're just constantly going through some type of racial training, because they have to be trained. They have to understand what's going on and where people are coming from. But regardless, it's just that I'm really just fed up of the life that I'm living here in Silicon Valley. I love living here. It's great to train. It's been great for my coffee business. But in terms of living personally, it's as if every year you're trying to make it harder for me. You're trying to get me to break, right? It's like where I'm living, it's like really raising my rent during a pandemic. It's like, why are you doing that to me, right? You're saying like, okay, we're gonna see how much more we can take out of you, where I'm like, all right, I gotta run for city council. There really needs to be rent control. I think the standard should be $2,000 for rent. I think that's even high, but I think that if you're gonna charge us $3,000 in rent, then you should be paying for utilities, right? They should be paying for water. Where I live, they used to pay for water and garbage, and then one year they're like, oh, you have to pay for it. And they post-dated it, right? So I wasn't even paying for the current months. I've always been paying for previous months. So all of these things add up, And then, I talk to people on the housing commission, and they say, well, we've capped it at raising rent to 5%. I'm like, you shouldn't be allowed to raise rent, period, because it's at 3,000 and rent should be at 2,000, and that's still high. So I just don't have faith that anybody is really going to act with a sense of urgency. And I know people say cities act slow. And I'm like, that's fine, but I'll be the one that will always have a sense of urgency. Every time I send an email to a city staff official, they would feel the sense of urgency in me of being like, this has to get done. If it takes 6 months, that's fine, but then it's just going to be 6 months of urgency emails of why it needs to get done yesterday.
Yes, and I agree with you. Do it. Get off your behind and go do it. Do it. Don't talk about it. Do it.
Well, we're a few minutes over. I don't know if any of you have anything else on your minds that you really wanted to share or talk about tonight.
Buy my cakes and we must talk. I want to meet both of you in person.
Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just scanning the Q&A if there's anything else. Someone supports your run for city council already. Would you quickly just remind people where they can find your products if they want to support you?
You can find Fen Coffee online at fencoffee.com, at Fen Coffee, and we're in the market at Edgewood, DeLucci's Market, Bianchini's, and the Willows Market.
I'm at 233 North Grant Street in the city of San Mateo. And I'm sorry we're going through COVID, but the one thing COVID has done for me is that I used to let my customers in my house. I have a white couch, and that was terrible on my white couch. Now I take the cakes to them at the curbside or they meet me at the door. So my couch is very, very happy. It is once again white.
My website is savorblends.com, SAVORBLENDS.com. We are at the market at Edgewood in Palo Alto and DeLucci's Market in Redwood City. And I can be reached at lisa@savorblends.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much to the panelists. I really appreciate you being here. And thank you to everyone watching from home. I really hope that we as a local journalism organization help keep this kind of dialogue alive, and that there are more stories and more conversations like this one that we have in the months and years to come. And in case you missed it, we did host a virtual town hall last week on police reform, which I highly recommend watching. It's recorded on our YouTube channel, which I think is, if you just Google YouTube and Palo Alto Online, you should find it. And I believe the recording of tonight's event will also be available on YouTube if you want to share it with anyone. And if you are not signed up for the Peninsula Foodist newsletter, please do so. And you can do that by going to any of our websites /express/foodist. So that could be paloaltoonline.com/express/foodist. Thank you so much. I hope we can do this again and maybe one day in person.
Thank you. I look forward.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hope you all team up for something.
Thank you.
Oh, it's going to happen.
Somebody has to come and help me learn how to do this.
See you later.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Thanks, Elena. Bye.